Anytime you're marketing yourself, you're wanting to see the audience that you're working with. You want to see some type of change in them, that they either have more knowledge or they have more desire to be a part of you.
Welcome to Nonprofit Docs, where we offer remedies for what ails your nonprofit. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Hardy. Our guest today is Roger Cabe, an expert on nonprofit marketing. That's right, nonprofit marketing. Why do we need that? Well, I worked with Roger several times over the years in my capacity as the Director of Nonprofit Certificate Education at the University of Notre Dame. And Roger's going to let us know why we need to market our nonprofit. Roger became the Executive Director of Vision Outreach International, VOI, in 2011. And this organization follows Christ in changing lives through global sight and light restoration. Since 2002, he has traveled abroad more than 35 times, leading volunteers to bring sight to those in need. This is done through cataract surgery, and their organization has conducted over 230 global endeavors. They performed over 13,000 surgical procedures and supplied nearly $28 million in free care. He has worked in the nonprofit arena since 1982 and is an award-winning honors graduate from the University of Notre Dame, holding a master's degree in nonprofit administration from the Mendoza College of Business. He and his wife, Denise, have been married for 43 years and have 5 grown children and 16 grandchildren. He exercises often, loves to play pickleball, and ran the 2014 Chicago Marathon. And now he's training to run the 2025 Chicago Marathon with 3 children of his own this fall. As part of this endeavor, they are raising $10,000 for Movember, an organization specializing in men's physical and mental health. Roger loves to teach, consult, and work with individuals and organizations that have a heart for learning, an ability for change, and a passion for growth. He's a man of great integrity, I know from working with him, and he has years of experience. And today he is here to talk with us about why you should market your nonprofit and how to do it. So please welcome my good friend and colleague, Roger Cabe. Welcome to Nonprofit Docs, Roger Cabe. We've been friends for a long time and colleagues for a long time. We both love carrot cake, and that's important, right?
That's right.
So,
that's correct. It's the best part.
That's the best part. So we're here today to talk about marketing nonprofits because you have done a lot of this. You're an expert in this field now on top of being a director of a nonprofit. But the question I get from nonprofits a lot is, I'm a nonprofit. I'm not a for-profit. Why do I have to market? That I went into the nonprofit world so I wouldn't have to be like a for-profit, right? So why do I have to market? You got an answer to that question?
Well, that's a great question. I would kind of answer it with a question. Why do people talk? Because if we're silent, people don't know who we are, or they don't know about us. They don't have any information about us. Say, who are you? And
right.
They're left to wonder. So, it's interesting because when I was doing some research one time about what people really want to know about my organization is they want to know that we're a credible organization. And when I started thinking about that, I thought, we have credibility, but it's unarticulated credibility. Nobody knows the credibility we have because we didn't have out stories. We didn't have out stats. People didn't know what we've done, where we've been, and how long we've been together. So it was very important for them to feel like we're somebody that they can trust by seeing that information and then seeing maybe who's gone and some people they can talk to. And as they get recommendations from other people, then our credibility grows and we're an organization that they want to be a part of. So it's very important that we get that information out so that people can hear what we're all about and why we exist in the first place.
So really, for nonprofits, I mean, to get funding, you have to have credibility, right?
Correct.
Funders are not going to give you money. It's as simple as that. So this is really a major credibility builder when you talk about marketing. It's not about, selling kind of, I guess, but it's really credibility to let funders know, hey, we're using your funds the way they should be used. Plus, I would think that you use a lot of volunteers. And I would think this also attracts volunteers to your program.
That's correct. And, most people want to talk to someone who's been before. And so we kind of make that available. And even that in and of itself, just connecting someone who's been a part of our organization before, that in itself is a marketing, because if they had a great experience, then it's likelihood they'll share that with others. And then hopefully that next person coming to join us will also have the same kind of experience.
Yep. If they don't know what you do as a nonprofit, they're not going to be invested. They're not going to be engaged. So this is a
Correct.
way to do that, correct? Okay.
Correct.
All right.
That
Well,
is
let's
correct.
jump into it. Let's talk about the basics of marketing. What do we have to know?
It's interesting. If you go out on Google and you put in the word marketing and kind of what's out there, you will get over 1 billion replies to what marketing is. So marketing is so broad. It's based on who you're talking to. And so one of the gurus of our day, a guy named Seth Godin, who is a marketing expert in and of himself, he says marketing is the act of making change happen. And marketing is the work of human beings to create the condition for that change. So anytime you're marketing yourself, you're wanting to see the audience that you're working with, you want to see some type of change in them, that they either have more knowledge or they have more desire to be a part of you. So there's some type of change that we're trying to create, and it's kind of a difference between benefit and value. And we talk about that in our classes of marketing and stuff, and what is the difference and how do you make that happen?
So change, I mean, if we think about nonprofits, that's what we're about. If we're not about helping people change or helping situations get better, if we're not talking about change, then what are we doing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the world is changing around us all the time. And I think about back in 1982 when I got married. Now, that was a long time ago. We were married, we were a young couple. And for the first Christmas, I bought my wife a microwave. And she goes, microwave? What do I need with a microwave? I don't want a microwave. I never needed one before. Why do I need one now? Well, marketing was buying her a microwave and said, look, just before you throw it out, just try it. And she tried it. And then she tried it again. And she tried it again. And after 43 years of marriage, we've never been without a microwave. And so that
How
in
would
of
you
itself,
live without a microwave
exactly.
now, right?
So, that was a change, and it was a necessary change, and it kind of sped up, the preparation of food. And so, it was a good thing to introduce that to her early on in our marriage.
So how do we communicate the change that we're making in the world? How does this work with marketing? And is there a secret sauce for the success?
The thing that I've heard that's very important is stats and stories. People love a good story. They want to know what you're doing. And I'm not sure if there's a secret sauce. It's kind of, you try it, and if it works, you keep it. If it doesn't, you discard it. So I've seen some people before, they keep doing the same thing over and over and over and getting the same results, which is low. And someone once told me years ago, they says, my goodness, if the horse is dead, for goodness sake, dismount. So if you do something that's not working, it's time to try something else. And our society and the people and the different generations are viewing things differently than we do. And so we have to keep changing with them. Like years ago, our cars they just got us from point A to point B. Now they're being used as marketing. Every time it needs an oil change, the lights come up and say, you need to get an oil change. And that just marketed the fact that you need to go somewhere, or your tires are low. And so all these little gadgets and buttons that show up on our car, that in and of itself is kind of marketing the mechanics and what they can do for us. So our world is changing all the time, and we've got to be flexible and willing to learn and change with the world.
So it seems to me too that as you talk about the lights coming on in the car and all that, it's also to keep things top of mind, right? I mean, it's also to, for instance, when they think of cataract surgery in foreign countries for people who cannot afford it, if they've seen your marketing, they know that's what you do, right?
Correct.
And it's like front of mind, but you have to let them know that so that it's top of mind and they understand what you do.
Exactly. What a lot of people don't understand about cataracts is it's a slow process that begins to blind you. And you don't know you're going blind until you can't see well, and you're needing glasses, and now your glasses aren't helping. And then people who have had cataract surgery, It's one of the very few surgeries that doesn't just fix the problem, it takes you back. I've had cataract surgery, and all of a sudden my eyes went from 60 plus years old back to about 25, and I could see better than I've seen in a long time. And I'm like, whoa, this is amazing.
This is
And
life
so
changing. Yeah.
it is. It very much
Yeah.
so is.
Yeah. Especially if people are almost blind and they've lived like that for years. I assume you get a lot of really heartwarming responses, which I don't know if you capture those on video or not, but I would think that would be a big part. I mean, that's a result of what you do.
It's amazing that we've gotten everything from dances and screaming and everything. And then some people are very stoic because they're afraid if they show a lot of emotion, you might take it away from them or something, and they don't want it to go away. So we've seen it all. And, I have to be careful, in foreign countries. And here's another thing of marketing. You've got to know what, and we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit, but just what audience you're with. Because I remember one time being over in Africa, and I was warned not to look a lady in the eyes, and that's kind of hard when you work with eye care. And so after surgery, this lady, I didn't speak her language, but she was smiling so big, and I waved at her and she waved back at me, and I gave her a thumbs up, and she gave me a thumbs up, and she was so excited. And I heard later that the reason you don't look them in the eyes is because that's a marriage proposal. And I may have just proposed to that woman and didn't know it. So, you need to know your audience.
Yeah, cultural context is really important. It really is. Marketing takes a lot of effort. I mean, let's face it, a lot of people, we run pretty thin on staff. Sometimes it's just one person. I know you were kind of a one-man show for a while, and that's changed over the years. But how do you make time for this? What is the value proposition on this? How much value does this hold for a nonprofit?
Well, it's kind of hard to put it in quantity because the value can be seen differently. In fact, when we're talking about value, there's several types of value. I like to call them the intrinsic value and the extrinsic value. And people don't really comprehend what I'm saying. So let me demonstrate it this way. In fact, I've got a presentation of a PowerPoint that might help explain this just a little bit better. So we're talking about value. So a lot of people, when they're talking about value, the first thing they think about is money. So let me just ask you, Mark, you're seeing a bill on the screen. What is the value? What is this?
That's a $1 bill.
That is a $1 bill. So what's the value of this $1 bill?
Well, whatever you can buy for $1, I guess. You can't buy much for $1 much anymore, but it's our currency that we use to buy stuff.
Well, that's true. And some people would say, well, it's 100 pennies, there's $1. Okay. Well, when you think about this, when you look at the dollar itself, it's a piece of paper. It's got some gray and green ink on it. And after the plates have been made and all of that stuff, and where they print the money, to reprint a $1 bill, what do you think the cost is to actually reprint this $1 bill?
Well, since most of the stuff is done up front, I would say just the price of the paper and the ink.
Correct. It's actually 7.5 cents. So what I call the intrinsic value, the actual value of this piece of paper cost somebody, the U.S. government, 7.5 cents to print. So that's the intrinsic value of this piece of paper. Now let me show you another piece of paper here. What do you see?
$100 bill, Benjamin Franklin on it. Yeah.
Exactly. And so what does it cost to print a $100 bill, to reprint all of that, just like the $1 bill? What does it cost to print a $100 bill?
Well, probably the same amount, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
7.5 cents to print this $100 bill. Same size, same ink, some of the same colors, and it's 7.5 cents for this $100 bill, 7.5 cents for the $1 bill. So if I offered you one of these two bills, which one would you take?
Well, I'd definitely take the 100, right?
Exactly. And the question is, why would you take the $100 bill?
Because the value to me is $100. Well, no matter what it costs them to produce it, it's still worth $100 to me versus $1.
Well, why is it worth $100 to you?
because that's what society tells me it's worth, I guess. They say this
Exactly.
is, yeah, we agree that this is the currency of $100 and it's worth 100 of those other dollars. Yeah.
So the intrinsic value is 7.5 cents. The conferred value on the dollar bill is 100 pennies or $1. The conferred value from society, from the government on the $100 bill is $100. But intrinsically, they're the same. But society values one above the other because of what's been conferred on it. So when I'm talking about that with nonprofits and marketing, sometimes there's something that has intrinsic value to us, but someone from the outside may not see it as very valuable. So you can push that all day long. And if they aren't interested, you're just knocking up against a brick wall. So anyway, so there's a way to kind of figure out what is the conferred value on my nonprofit and what parts of my nonprofit are important to the individual. So here's a little definition of value. It's worth, merit, importance, the worth of something in terms of the amount of other things for which it can be exchanged. What are people willing to exchange for whatever it is I'm offering them? Are they willing to give us time? Are they willing to give us money? Are they willing to give us products? So in order to market it, you've got to show value in what you're doing. And someone else has to see that value and say, I agree with that it's valuable. Now I'm willing to offer my services or my money in order to make that work.
Ah, that's really good. And as you were talking, I'm thinking, well, I've had cataract surgery too. I know what it can do for people. So I understand the conferred value of having cataract surgery, whereas somebody who hasn't or doesn't need it may not. So I think it's within the context of your value system. Would that be correct? I don't know. So,
Well, it's a context of external or conferred value on your nonprofit. I mean, in the United States, the value of a cataract surgery is priced somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000 based on the lens that you get.
mhm.
And when you go overseas, and we have volunteer doctors and volunteer staff and a lot of products that are given to us, we can do a surgery on foreign soil for about $40. And so amazing, same results as we have here in the United States. And so we can do a lot more there for a lot less because of all of the input and supplies and volunteers and doctors giving their services on these particular trips that we do.
Yeah, and I know that our mutual good friend Mark Germano has been on one of these trips, and he was just blown away. He just really enjoyed himself. He was blown away by the work that your organization does. And so I guess when you're marketing, you're trying to market the conferred value,
Correct.
correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. So let's go back here where we're just talking about a difference of benefit versus cost. And I try to give credit where credit's due. A lot of this information you can get by reading the book by one of the Notre Dame professors, Dr. Urbany, grow by focusing on what matters. He talks about benefit and cost, and what's the benefit and what's the cost. And so I use this example a lot because this happened to me. And I used to go to Wendy's. The one on the left is the one that kind of an older version of Wendy's, and it's a restaurant in our area I used to go to all the time. And we'd go in, and it would be acceptable service, and we'd get the food, and it was fine. And we'd sit down and we'd eat and all that type of stuff. Well, they decided that they thought it was a good idea to upgrade their Wendy's to a new look. So if you look at the one on the right, you say, oh, this is the new look of Wendy's. It looks great. It looks nice. You go inside. They have different places to sit down. They've actually even got one of these cozy little fireplaces that you can kind of sit around and eat at, and kind of a nice ambient environment. But I went up, and there was one person in line in front of me, and the person behind the counter and the individual were just talking back and forth and back and forth. And I must have stood there 3 to 5 minutes. I'm like the second one in line, and I was never acknowledged that I was even there. So eventually my wife and I, we turned around and we walked out, and then we came back. We thought, okay, this was a fluke. They're just getting started with their new store. We'll come back. And the same thing happened. Now, when you talk about marketing, they're thinking, well, let's do this new building and it will give us a big boost. That's intrinsic value. But I am the customer, so I'm going to confer value on one of the two locations. And what do you think I'm looking for?
You're looking for customer service, right? You're looking to acknowledge, yeah, right.
So my convert value is better customer service. I'll put up with an older building with better customer service than I will with a newer building with poor customer service. Here's a question. How do you find value? It says it's not the intrinsic value that determines the worth, it's the conferred value that determines the worth of your organization, or it could be a service that your organization has or a product that your organization is trying to market. It's the conferred value. It's not what you think that gives you value. It's what your customer thinks. So this is not rocket science. How do you find out what the conferred value is?
And how do you do that?
That's a question. And
okay.
It's a very simple answer, but nonprofits, we get too complicated and we forget to stay simple. Here's a simple answer. Ask your customer. Find a way to ask your customer, what is it about us that you like? It was interesting. I did a study some years ago when I was working on some marketing information, and it's a series of questions. We talk about this in our teaching and stuff that you ask customers. And as you ask them, you have a certain way that they'll say something and you'll say, okay, and you'll repeat it back and say, but why? And they'll say something else and you'll repeat it back and you say, but why? And so you keep building this up and things just fall out of those conversations that you didn't realize were important, because there are some things that's really important to me. And I was kind of sad because my customers didn't care. And I'm like, well, it's important to me, but I can market that if I want to, but the likelihood of it paying the bills is low. So 3 of the things that fell out of those conversations that we had with various different people that we interviewed through email or through the phone. One was credibility. And I said, we have credibility, but we have what we call unarticulated credibility. And so we knew our stories, we knew our stats, we knew that we were doing something good, but we had not posted any of that on the web. We had not shared stories with people. We had not talked in public about the different things that we're doing in seminars and stuff. So although we knew we had credibility, nobody else knew we had credibility. So we had to find a way to put that stuff out. And then there was a thing called convenience. Really? Your customers want to have convenience? Well, yeah. And I go, what are you talking about? Well, to go on a trip with us, the way we used to do it is you would have to somehow find amongst our web pages the application. And then you would have to click on a button that would open up the application. And then you'd have to print the application. And then you'd have to fill it out with your pen. And then you'd have to take a picture of it or scan it or drop it by the office and get it back to us somehow. And this was a multi-layer, complicated situation.
It makes me exhausted just thinking about the process, right?
Exactly. And so I told our staff, guys, we've got to figure out how to do this fillable form online. So all they do is put in a bunch of information, hit a button, and they're registered. And so our folks loved when we moved to that. And the other thing was, we're not a rooted faith-based organization, but we have a lot of faith-based leadership. Some people said, I like the fact that you guys are Christian or faith-based. And I thought, well, we don't say anything about that. Are we ashamed of it? No, we're not ashamed of it. And then I looked at the philanthropic pie. And do you know that about 38% of all philanthropic dollars are given to religious organizations?
Right.
And I said, wow, we're missing out on a third of the pie. Let's share faith, not in your face, but at least enough that people know that what we're doing is not just about physical side, but about spiritual side also. So those 3 things kind of fell out of the conversations that you have with people, and you begin to find ways to be credible, to be convenient, to be articulate about your faith. And then people start coming toward you that have those same desires and want to be involved.
My daughter does a lot of marketing online, and they developed a new software called Relevant Reach. And what it does is it goes out and does surveys of your audience. And It asks questions like what you're talking about. And she said, the problem with marketing, unless you know what your customer wants, your client, your donors, whatever you want to call them, until you know that at a deep level, you can market all you want. It's not going to make any difference. You have to know what's important to them, and you can't assume it. So I think that goes to what you're saying.
Absolutely, it does. And your audience is just one of the pieces that you have to consider. There's other pieces you have to consider also.
Okay, so we've finished with part one, and we're time conscious here. We know people don't have all day to watch videos, but if you're interested in part two, then we're going to put a link below, and you can go right here, and we will put the link there. And Roger, we'll be right back with part two. Thank you.